Thanks for watching this video. Please make sure to watch the previous part. In the last part, we saw Josh realize that he has returned to the past. He becomes overjoyed as he realizes the possibilities he has to avoid the previous outcome. He, however, is approached by three guys. Unfortunately, trouble comes greeting Josh just one after another. One of them asks why Josh hasn't cleaned up the horse shit that they told him to clean up. Josh recognizes them as the Agnes Duchy's personal troops, also known as Centurions. One of the trio then demands that Josh answer him back after asking about the horse shit. The other person responds and says that Josh is mute and therefore cannot answer him back, to which the other person recalls that this was the case. Josh then in his mind remembers that he used to pretend to be mute, and the reason was to avoid the abuse that he remembers he used to get when he would consider fighting back. One of the trio then asks that he hasn't seen Lucia in a while, to which the other person responds that he should be quiet about saying that name. It is then clarified that Lucia is Josh's mother, the exclusive maid of the Agnes Duchy, and he recalls that her name should not be carelessly mentioned within the duchy, as it was a decree set by Duke Agnes in respect of the maid and himself. Joshua goes on to explain that he is the illegitimate child of Duke Agnes. He remembers that he used to be tormented by the other nobles when he was young because he was the Duke's illegitimate child. His main three tormentors were the three strong knights which stand before him, which are Gort, Lloyd, and Ross. He also says he vows to take revenge on them one day. Ross then tells Lloyd to shut up regarding Josh's mother, to which Lloyd responds that he shouldn't be worried about anything. Lloyd goes on to say that no one is usually around the stables except for Josh and maybe Lucian, to which Ross agrees that it's not a problem. Lloyd goes on to say that getting rid of Lucia and Josh would be alright under the Duchess' orders. It would make sense for the Duchess to want the illegitimate child and his mother to be gone, and because of this, the Duchess would be happy to vouch for them if that ever happened. Lloyd then says that it would have been the perfect time to get rid of them now. However, Lucia is not around and considers it a shame, with Ross agreeing. Lloyd then says that instead it is the perfect time to play around with Josh, assuming that they intend to torture him. Josh then says to himself that he has no intention of letting these bastards go after having insulted his mother, and of course for the attempt to torture him. He then clenches his fist as he tries to gather mana in it. He then asks himself if this was going to work, as this is something he hasn't done before as a child. He says that the way he performed the mana technique is different to how a normal person usually does it, which was a technique he discovered at an ancient ruins, and that he used it previously to reach his peak quickly. Josh goes on to say that this mana technique that he practiced previously had a different method of operation, which was not done by accumulating the mana under the lower abdomen where there would be a mana hole, but instead, it was to use the mana scattered in his surroundings, avoiding any potential limitations, by allowing that mana to be absorbed throughout the body instead of accumulating them below the abdomen. He says that the method also allows the mana to be concentrated to a specific part, and that this was done in order to burst it in an instant when required to provide explosive power. He goes on to say that he didn't have to go through the process of creating a mana hole, which is what everyone did to create that vessel of where you store mana, and says this usual method would end up taking others years to master the use of mana because of all these requirements. He then says that there's no helping his fast start as a mana user. Gort then suddenly says that he wants the three of them to surround Josh and beat him up right away. He says that his anger is through the roof just by looking at his face. Ross points out that Gort's temper is abnormally short today, and he assumes it is because he was rejected earlier by a woman he tried to ask out, to which Gort responds that this anger is not because of that, and he goes on to say that he does not believe he'd be able to control his strength today, while noticing something odd with Josh. Josh has his eyes closed, as if he's trying to put himself in a zen state. Gort then says, "What?" as he feigned standing up because he's nervous. Lloyd then says that he can't believe Josh has his eyes closed at a time like this before he's about to be beaten up. Josh, on the other hand, is concentrating to get a handful of mana in his right arm, saying that he would have needed 10 years just to do what he's doing now before he came back, giving him confidence that this is going to work. He then opens his eyes, and with determination, as Gort is taken back, shocked to see Josh's glare. Gord yells with anger from being intimidated for a quick moment. Gord then angrily attacks in response to this. Josh readies his arm with a handful of mana, completing his preparations, and Josh goes ahead and punches Gord right in the stomach, successful delivering the mana-based attack. Gord then falls onto the ground, groaning with pain, and becomes unconscious. Lloyd was confused as to what had happened, not believing that Josh can take down Gord in one punch. Josh thinks to himself that something is not right, feeling something else in his lower abdomen, not recalling that he has had this before. He says his lower abdomen should be completely empty, since he has not been storing any mana there. Lloyd, not able to resist any further, draws his sword with anger, and he says that Josh must be crazy because he wants to die from having done what he just did. Josh then tries to think of the best strategy while being wary of his possible limitations, though he knows that knocking out Lloyd would be his best strategy here, because he believes that Ross would be cautious enough to think not to attack him if his two friends are knocked out right in front of him. And so Josh becomes determined to try it again, to knock out Lloyd as his second immediate objective. Lloyd yells that it's going to be Josh's funeral as it'll be his final time. Josh dodges in the nick of time, with Lloyd being wide open. Josh readies another attack with a handful of mana in his right arm. Lloyd then comments that he thinks Josh is using mana. Josh lands a clean blow, right straight onto Lloyd's left cheek. Lloyd gets thrown up in the air, leaving a trail of blood, as Ross watches him fly. Lloyd then lands on the ground, with Ross starting to get very anxious. Ross turns to Josh, thinking that things are getting crazy. Shocked, saying to himself that Josh has been hiding such power all this time. Josh, on the other hand, starts to feel the rebound effects of having to use this much mana, appearing to lose strength. But he then starts focused and hopes Ross would not attack, thinking to himself that in order to dissuade him more, he yells out to Ross saying that message needs to be passed on. Ross becomes shocked as he did not expect Josh to speak, assuming all this time that Josh was mute. Ross then asks, "You know how to talk?" Josh ignores the question and says that from this moment on, if anyone insults his mother, including the Centurions, that those persons will not be left alone. With my name, Joshua, on the line. As he looks at Ross, full of determination and with eloquence in his speech, Ross feels the weight of the glare that Josh has given as he steps back, feeling more anxious than before. Ross then runs away, yelling out "monster." Josh then starts to get a lot more exhausted after having used those attacks with mana. Josh's eyes then starts to get heavy as he feels his strength being sapped away from him. Josh falls down onto the ground like a mic drop, not being able to keep his eyes open. Though he tries to keep them open, he struggles. Josh is then left with no choice but to doze off as everything blacks out. This ends part 2 of this series. Please give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more.